Good afternoon from wherever you might be. What we're what I am going to relate hopefully quickly today is an effort to uh, reassess the Department of Defense, the CIA, Inspector General assessments of an event that took place after the first Gulf War in Iraq in 1991, commonly known as the Khamisiyah weapons depot facility destruction. There has been now 28 years past. Hard to believe. Um, Millions of dollars in research and efforts to quantify exposures and health outcomes in Persian Gulf War veterans that may or may not have been near the Khamisiyah weapons depot facility on both March 4th and March 10th, when it is now common knowledge that we did, in fact, blow up chemical weapons after the first Gulf War. And I want to, as a little background on me, I was there. I hauled all the demolition supplies for the entire operation and subsequently was honorably discharged in 92 when my enlistment was up. And in 95, 96, 97, was one of the nation's leading advocates as far as testifying before Congress, the Presidential Advisory Committee, just about every facet of this investigation. Um, and then was a consultant with the Kansas Veterans Commission to help institute the Kansas Gulf War Veterans Research that's been done by Lee Steele and others. But what I'm doing now is as part of a master's research project in human environmental geography, utilizing artificial intelligence and geospatial investigative systems, GIS. We're going to do a redo, a reset, because the capabilities, the technology exists today to where one person with the proper documentation and resources and expertise can basically do a better job than the entire federal government did back in 97. And it just to demonstrate briefly today, this is an introductory, uh, just to get it out there to some people who were aware of what it took to go through documentation and try to peruse out of all this a narrative that was most accurately depicted what happened on the ground. That's not what happened in 97, 98, 99, 2000. Basically, um, hypothetical models were extrapolated to come up with what seemed or what was presented as events on the ground. We now know not be the case. And so I have constructed or trained Claude AI to review documents and categorize them and actually quantify and extrapolate relevance to the project. In other words, the AI can go through documents now that it took us months to try to figure out how they related to one another, what AI is best at is taking all those into consideration and then coming up with meaningful relations. So let's see. What have I not done in this folder? Yeah, let's do this. Let's just pull out some of these old GulfLink files that were loaded up to the declassification project would release certain documents every few days or weeks, and then we had to go pull them off and see what was on them, and then try to tie them all together and make some sense out of it. So I'm just going to select a bulk set here. I don't know what's on them. Um, and let's put them into this exposures framework that I've designed and see what the AI makes of it. I might have too many in here, but we'll see. Yeah. Some of these are pretty large, so let's take a few out. This is just an example. Let's see if it'll run it with that many. Now, this Claude AI, it's one of the most advanced AIs out there commercially available right now. I've been using it for about 6 months in other projects. And as you can see from over here on the right side, what it's going to do, these are documents that I've already had examined, and it's going to read those, and then as you can see, it's now making changes to include those documents and where they fit within the Khamisiyah investigation. So this is a way of not only going through these documents and finding out what's on them and how they relate, but also being able to catalog for future reference. Because as you can see on the left, it the, the, they're just titled 950. They just got a number. Over here on the right, you can see that it's going through them and finding out what the title is, assigning a document number, a classification as far as uh, the type of evidence, if it's factual with primary evidence, factual with corroboration. It's assigning all those values, and then at the same time, on the far right, it's giving you a score, a reliability score of all that I had it built into the to the framework. So as you can see now, it's going through it. It's categorizing and calling out a description within the document. Uh, so we'd never had this capability in the past. Even the federal government didn't. Um, and you know, the amount of time that it's so far it's been 27 seconds. And unfortunately, that was my last message for a couple hours because there is a limit on the amount of data I can crunch through it. Um, Probably saying it was interrupted. Not sure why. Not sure if I got out of it what I needed. Uh, Probably ran out of room. But so here's what it's. I do believe it made the changes, though. It won't undo making the changes. So, methodological critique thus far with the documents that I've uh, had to incorporate, which is quite small, really, in comparison. Um, so, what the AI basically says by looking at the documents, and these are just straight, pure documents for their reports, their intelligence documents. There's none of my personal knowledge interjected in it to it, other than asking it, here's what I want to look at. I want to look at the March 4th bunker destruction at Khamisiyah as compared to the March 10th, because the March 4th destruction was never modeled, it was never investigated for various reasons, which I'll go into at a later date. But right now, this is just an overview of the methodological and technological uh, framework from which I'm reevaluating all of this in a standard classification uh, methods, so that it can go into a much larger report, and then, as with peer-reviewed scientific um, inquiry, then be replicated or at least substantiated factually, if any of that makes sense. So, what's the AI say about it so far? Despite scientific studies showing measurable neurological effects and institutional capacity to track veteran health, investigators systematically failed to incorporate clinical data into exposure assessments. Inadequate quality assurance, independent reviews consistently identified failures in procedural rigor across multiple institutions, suggesting systemic weakness in investigative protocols rather than isolated incidents. And despite substantial accumulated research, no comprehensive reassessment has been conducted to integrate findings across studies, leading to fragmented scientific understanding. These methodological deficiencies appear most pronounced at institutional boundaries, suggesting that cross-organizational information sharing represents the critical vulnerability in the investigative ecosystem. In other words, the Presidential Advisory Committee, the CIA, the Department of Defense, the GAO, all the congressional hearings and committees did not share on a level that was likely to synthesize a concerted effort that was going to produce any result that was going to be usable. Um, and then it makes recommendations. Create a unified database merging exposure data, clinical outcomes, and research findings to enable cross-domain analysis currently absent from investigative framework. Develop updated Gulf War illness case definitions that account for aging effects while maintaining discriminatory power between deployed and non-deployed veterans. Some of that's been done. Implement cross-institutional quality assurance protocols. Part of, well, a lot of what the AI is picking up here and not accounting for is that this was done 28, 29 years ago. These agencies are no longer looking at any of this. So this is going to be future recommendations. Conduct a comprehensive meta-analysis of completed research to identify remaining knowledge gaps and prioritize resource allocation for future investigations. This is probably going to be something that the Research Advisory Committee, in whatever form that it is, in today's environment, which I think there's a meeting coming up in May, which I probably will see if I can get some of this in front of them. Um, Adopt the portable documentation classification framework as a standard operating procedure across all agencies involved in the Gulf War illnesses research. What can be done here is this framework can become uh, available to anybody that wants to research uh, or investigate, in which there is ongoing uh, investigation and research with this issue, but it's waned significantly over the years and really needs to be revamped. And what this can do is help with that and at least provide a better direction with which to direct research. But and then here is this is just a, an appendix that shows how the documents are classified. You got primary source material, contemporaneous records, eyewitness testimony, physical evidence, operational records, and direct communications, official documentation, technical materials, narrative. This is something that, you know, I spent uh, a few days building the AI to be able to do this. Um, as far as going through and being familiar with and possessing these documents, I've had them for 28 years, so I know what the story is. It's just a matter of trying to now put this in a context that other people can not only just better understand what transpired, not only at the Khamisiyah Weapons Depot, but with subsequent investigations and research that's come from it. And the goal is that there's some things that need to be relooked at. Let's just put it that way. I'm not going to make any gross assertions at this point, other than um, the bulk of the rockets that were destroyed at Khamisiyah were done so on March 4th. That event was not modeled in any way, shape, or form, and instead they opted to go with an event that was 4 days later when far less troops were in the area. In fact, we'll just go back and look at another. Let's see. The comparison, see, for the last few days, I've been looking at troop locations. See, that's the other thing is in all these intelligence documents and reports, we're able to, utilizing GIS and AI, reconstitute troop locations near the Khamisiyah or at the Khamisiyah Weapons Depot facility in March of 91 on both March 4th, March 10th, and days surrounding that where demolition operations were being conducted. The main consideration being that units that were initially identified as being there or in the area within 50 kilometers on March 4th were removed because conveniently, when they decided to model the March 10th detonations, then they no longer had to consider troops that were there on March 4th. If they had left by March 10th, they were no longer considered exposed or potentially exposed to Khamisiyah, because if you don't model the March 4th event and they're not there on the 10th, then they didn't get exposed. That is the contention that was derived from the efforts of our United States government. The same government who initially uh, promoted the notion of the three no's. There was no chemicals in the theater of operation. There was no use of chemical weapons. Therefore, there's no exposure and no illness. This was, um, and to some degree, still remains the official stance, at least of the Defense Department, to one degree or another. So there was always an effort to downplay um, these events. Um, it must keep in mind by March 4th, they were already retrograding leadership back to the United States to start planning celebratory parades and welcome home while we were still finishing this operation. And by subsequently destroying a large cache of over 2,000 Iraqi rockets full of sarin that had just been uh, filled at the factory a few weeks before, really put a damper on what was trying to be portrayed as the perfect military mission, when we know that not there is no such thing. So as the AI has pointed out here, just by comparing the troop locations and the units that are on the list of both before on the March 4th detonation and then on the March 10th detonation, um, the conclusion is the temporal restriction to the March 10th through 13th effectively removed the March 4th Bunker 73 demolition from consideration, while the categorical exclusion of forward deployed units, particularly from the 18th Airborne Corps, demonstrates a consistent pattern of eliminating units that would likely have been present during the March 4th incident but departed before March 10th. This systemic exclusion has significant implications for accurate exposure assessment and suggests a deliberate methodological choice to focus exclusively on the March 10th pit demolition rather than the potentially more significant March 4th Bunker 73 demolition. And there's a whole diatribe of why they decided not to model the March 4th bunker detonation, one of which they cite they do not have or did not have accurate meteorological data, which I have not only maintained but have improved upon, as to now have ample satellite information on the March 4th event, um, as well as photographic evidence showing that the plume did in fact blow to the south over coalition and international forces, uh, unlike was easily dismissed, and they were told that they blew away from U.S. troops and that a front moved in and rained and washed all the agent away. Unfortunately, that did not happen for about 18 hours, so there was plenty of time for plume dispersal into the areas of those troops that were removed from having been there on the 4th. About 20,867 personnel were there when uh, about 900 rockets blew up, many of which were ignited and flew some 20 kilometers away. In fact, eyewitness reports. And let's just pull up just one. Uh, see, I've gone through and renamed it. Here is a couple soldiers standing around a rocket motor, which is indicative of had flown out of Khamisiyah. And I'm not entirely certain, but having served in the 82nd Airborne Division, um, and having documentation of an eyewitness report of the commanding general of the 82nd Airborne depicting that one of the rockets landed in his talk, I do believe that that is General Johnson of the 82nd Airborne Division. That tactical operations center was about 20 kilometers away from Khamisiyah. But according to the Department of Defense, they were not there by this time. So there's lots to do. Uh, just thought you would like to see some of what it takes to. And if you look over here to the left, there's some of the work that's been done on this particular project already that went into analyzing some of the documentation. As you can see, this over here is the knowledge base that then informs work that I do over here, and that's everything from timelines to collections of documents, meteorological data, research advisory committees, DOD, CIA, IG investigations, different analysis, and then we go over here and, for instance, I'm also in the process of taking transcripts off of video interviews, whether it's C-SPAN or CBS Evening News or what have you, and converting those to text and then adding those to the knowledge base. So there's lots to do here, lots to be done, lots been done. I just wanted to get this out to some of the people that are starting to uh, um, take a moment of their attention to see, it's one thing to tell people, hey, I'm re-examining the Khamisiyah event, but when you actually show them the process that's being done, that is such an technological leap over what was done 30 years ago, um, with 30 years worth of hindsight, documentation, and research thrown into it. We're likely to, at least for minimum, come up with a clearer picture on what's been done and what needs to be done so that we can finally move in a direction that's going to at least provide some explanation for these Gulf War veterans that have been suffering with this now for 35 years and their families. They are owed an explanation, at least, as to why their life was stolen from them.